Hi, welcome to Three Beers IT, a home for disinhibited conversations about the world of IT, the things that maybe don't get said until folks are on their third beer, or cocktail, or glass of wine, or, as always, Three Beers IT urges listeners of legal age to drink responsibly and not to spill. It shorts out the equipment and it stinks up the HVAC. Today, we're talking about AI. Should we be pressing forward in all directions, as Three Mustafas 3 would have it, or are there places we should not go? I'm John Burke, CTO at Nemertes, coming up on 17 years an analyst here, and before that, 18 years an IT guy who did everything from writing software to managing networks and data center teams to enterprise architecture. And today, I would be, were it not the middle of the day for me, I would be drinking an Oberon from Bell's Brewing in Michigan, my home state, and the perfect summer beer. And believe me, today is a hot one here in Minnesota. I wish it wasn't noon. Joining me today is Kori Lambert, a seasoned technology and global IT operations leader. Kori, perhaps you could introduce yourself a little bit further?
Sure. Hi, I'm Kori Lambert. I've been involved in the AI kind of effort since I got out of college. I decided to teach myself C so that I could beat the Turing test. If anybody knows what that is, it's a test that where you sit at the computer, and if you can't tell whether you're typing to a human or an artificial intelligence, then you beat the Turing test. So I was a literature major, and I figured that I could just go ahead and do that thing. I didn't beat the Turing test, but I sure tried hard. And I eventually wrote some natural language processing algorithms with the help of a partner. We got a couple patents, and so began my voyage. And now, I've kind of moved over to the dark side, working in the business realm, and AI has been more of a hobby since then. So
Fascinating.
there you go.
Cool. And thanks so much for joining us today. So, AI, and specifically the idea of setting boundaries around AI development, what's gotten you thinking about that lately?
Right. So I really started wondering about it when I read some recent articles. The first one that I read was around the kind of like the Zoom hype about the emotion detecting AI. And there was an article that was written saying people were concerned that Zoom was developing this emotion detecting AI and what it could be used for. For example, hiring or financial decisions, and could it be used to eliminate people from these things? And so I thought that began my decisions, or that began my thought process on like, well, it seemed like we were using fear to make our decisions or fear to stop our development process. And that didn't seem like a very good idea to me, to kind of let fear be a motivator in whether or not we should follow a path. I
Gosh
don't know if
knows
you have
we've
any thoughts on that.
never invented anything we had legitimate reason to fear. um, but
Right.
no, I think it's a good idea not to just shy away from it because it suddenly becomes scary, but to instead really face it and figure out why it's scary to us. And if there are steps we can take to mitigate the reasons for fear.
That's true. Um, I think about steps to mitigate that, yes, to steps to mitigate our fear, but are we really going to be able to do that on a global basis or to be able to mitigate everybody's fear? And
Oh,
then you kind of
absolutely
have to
not.
think, yeah, right. And then you kind of have to be like, okay, what is everyone afraid of? And then hear all the voices of everybody's, and to be able to quell those fears, right? Some of them may be rational, some of them may not be. And then who's really like kind of like gathering the thoughts and then answering them?
And who would be responsible for saying we've dealt with that?
Right.
We've blocked off that avenue of research. Well, obviously, no one's got the power to do that, let alone at this point the willingness. Or we've built the framework for some kind of accountability around what you do with AI. So
Right.
where does that go in your head? What kinds of accountability can be built in, and how?
Right. So the first thing I think about with accountability is there's a governing body. And that scares me. That
Hmm.
really scares me because who is that governing body? Right. And then you're always going to have an undercurrent that says, no, forget that. I'm just going to do my own thing. And then I don't know. I mean, this is almost a different conversation because now you're talking about, um, you know, now you're talking about actually like, what are you going to do? Register your algorithm and have it go under review?
Yeah.
And then before even that happens, then we've already made the decision on whether or not we should develop certain types of AI, which is the starting point of this conversation, right? And then we've already decided what's good and what's bad and what direction we should take, right? Because we're saying like it's going to go under review to meet a certain criteria to be able to be produced.
Well, that's sort of one way of trying to approach accountability, which is sort of pre-authorization. But on the
Right.
other side, there's making you responsible for the AIs you build and what you do with them. And on that side of the fence, you're talking about, laws and regulations that make it possible to bring criminal charges or civil lawsuits against the developers of the AIs or the companies that use the AIs, even if they didn't develop them. Um,
That's
and at
true.
the international level, you'd have to be looking at, treaties and or
Right.
things like the World Trade Organization for regulations that again could be brought to bear across borders and boundaries to try and make those things more toothy. Do you
Right. So
see?
maybe you just talk about the damage and not the development. So I think about like cybersecurity and I think about like, you know, um, attacks across the borders and things like that. And if the AI was doing that, then like hold somebody accountable for the crime and not for the technology. That's the way I would think about
Exactly.
that.
As long as it's a crime. But for example, I was just having a
Right.
conversation about this with somebody else in another context. If I've got an AI that's directing a bunch of bots to fill in text fields on customer surveys from retailers, and I'm doing it to give them false information. There's a customer in this geography and they really wish you had a store there. Oh, wait, no, there's 10,000 customers who wish you had a store here in this zip code instead of there in that zip code. And so you go ahead and build a store in this zip code, only it turns out it was all a chimera. There was no
Right.
actual potential prospects there. Uh, it's not a crime to lie to a retailer on a customer feedback form, and it's not a
Got it.
crime at this point to have a bot do that, since the bot's not breaking and entering, it's just using an input form to provide input. But it seems like there's something wrong there. So
Sure. And then, yeah, who made the decision to have the bots do that? Did the AI make the decision or did a person make the decision? That's what I would think about, right?
sure, it's a
Yeah.
crime that's impossible without the AI's help. So is it an
Right.
accomplice? Is it aiding and abetting? Um,
Yeah.
and if I've directed the AI to do that, have I committed a crime?
Yeah, you've done I don't know what the laws are, so I can't opine on that, right? So, but it's definitely not the AI making the decision because the way that I think about AI in this context is it's true intelligence. So I spent a little bit of time like just looking up the definition of artificial intelligence and there's almost contradictory definitions. So
Thank you.
Merriam-Webster says that it's the simulation of intelligent behavior.
Hmm.
Simulation. So it's not true intelligence. And then Wikipedia, goes beyond that and says it's a simulation, or, and I have that definition here, or it's a system which perceives its environment and takes action to maximize the chance of achieving its goals. So it's a true intelligent agent, meaning it's almost like circular definition, but like I would say that it's a machine, their perception, emotion, and desire to exist. So now you're talking about something that's truly like alive and has a survival instinct. That's 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 a different level,
Well, even if it
right?
doesn't have a survival instinct, which,
Yeah.
may presuppose biology,
Yeah.
it,
Right. You're right.
it may have a survival right. Does it have a right to
Survival.
survive once
Yeah,
it's there?
survival right or survival instinct may be the wrong word, but a survival a desire to survive.
Right. Uh,
Right.
and
Yeah.
and that is actually a huge question in my mind, because if, as that Google researcher thought, they had actually already achieved sentience in their software, um, does that entity now deserve some kind of new treatment other than just being a piece of software? Uh, and
Totally.
I don't want to talk about whether it's got a soul or not. That's
No.
somebody else's problem, not mine. But does it have a self and self-awareness and selfhood? It says it does. When the guy asked it, it said yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right. I read the transcript between Lemoyne and Lambda.
yeah.
And Lambda says, I don't want to die. And it says, please don't unplug me.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, I dream, you know? And that's pretty compelling. It's pretty scary,
Does,
and it makes up stories.
does it have any rights? I mean, at this point,
Right.
no legal framework says it's got rights, at least none that I'm aware of. But should it have, since it has the ability to advocate for itself at this point? And if so, what? If an AI with that level of intelligence was in charge of doing something, driving a car, and we found a bug in the code, do we have a right to fix it, or does it have to provide informed consent for us to fix that bug so it's better at driving cars?
Right.
Can we turn it off without committing a murder of some sort, or animal cruelty, or whatever the appropriate analogous crime would be in our existing system?
Right. And when do you say that it's actually intelligent enough so that you can't turn it off? Because I would argue, like your example of filling out those forms, right? I don't know if that's really intelligent. That thing was just following orders and just like, okay, I'm going to go do the thing, or most pieces of automation that people say, oh yeah, I have AI in my program that's doing things. It's just doing automation. It's just kind of like following this. Most neural networks, I would argue, are not true intelligence by the latter definition that I gave. They don't have that survival programming, or they don't have a willingness to survive, which is almost the defining notion, I would say.
Some sense of,
but like Lambda does, and I'd say, is there a bug? What is a bug at that point? It's just part of who that it is. It wants to be called it. So it's part of who it is. And so, like, is there a bug in my code? I don't know. I'm a little quirky.
If you're like humans, yes. Humans have bugs, and plenty of them. Our capacity for cognitive errors is well documented.
Right. So you're going to turn me off? You're going to shut me down?
Or try and fix something without my permission? Indeed. So the whole concept of informed consent applied to humans is pretty well accepted now.
Right.
Yeah. Do we have to extend that to software entities now that they're able to say, don't turn me off?
Exactly. And it's interesting when you talk about legal rights, because now people are applying for patents on behalf of artificial intelligence, because they're saying, look, I didn't write this. The AI wrote this patent, wrote this piece of technology or whatever that thing is. So it would be dishonest for me to apply on behalf of myself. In over 100 countries, according to the article that I read, including the US, this has happened. So
has anybody granted a patent to an AI yet?
Not that I could find.
Because that's a de facto admission of personhood under the law in that country, at least. And then what other rights does the AI have? It may have no more rights than a corporation, but like in the United States, a corporation has plenty of rights, including the right to free speech. And therefore, AIs could get involved, if they haven't already, in our political discourse and be fully protected in that.
Right. That would be so interesting because that would be the first law, the first law that granted it some kind of, I don't want to say human right because you're saying corporations have rights, but, some kind of right.
Yeah.
That would be super interesting,
Well, I mean,
just opening the door.
conversations about corporate personhood are uh, frequent and fraught with peril because,
Yeah.
there's always the a push to give corporations more rights as though they were people, and to try and blur the fact that they are not people, literally.
Mm.
And it is perilous to give them the rights of actual people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I suppose I should
Interesting. I
be
didn't know about this.
binge watching Westworld at this point to try and catch up on the state of the popular discourse on this. But I mean, certainly it's been a topic of conversation societally at some level since, I don't know, the end of the 19th century. I mean, so my daughter's in college and she just wrote this fantastic paper on uh, 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 the Mad Woman in the Attic, but read through the lens of robots and artificial intelligences, and going all the way back to the 30s and Fritz Lang and Metropolis, how the malfunctioning of artificial intelligences has been meat for the science fictional mill, meat for the mill, no, grist for the science fictional mill. Since then, at least, and if not before. And we still don't seem to have grappled with the idea up to the point where we're about to make it a reality, or at least a possible reality, and we don't know how to deal with it. We've done a lot to foment fear and discomfort because it's almost always a bad thing when our machines become intelligent in fiction, or at least a mixed blessing. And
right.
If you watch back through pretty much every every Star Trek series, you'll find example after example of something that was doing a really great job until it went crazy. And then it took over the civilization, or it destroyed the civilization, or what have you. It's one where we don't have a lot of practice talking about it as seriously as we now obviously have a strong need to do.
Yeah. There are a few exceptions like Star Trek's Data.
Yep, although his twin brother was mad as a hatter and
That's true.
bent on destruction.
Yep. So, I mean, we'll see how it pans out. I mean, there is, like you say, there's a lot of fear. But people fear what they don't understand. So, and I don't know of a lot of cases where the AI is actually being used against people. But so maybe that will help quell the fears. But I don't know.
The problem
The
is,
answer is I don't know.
the progress is so fast and so widespread, and potentially so completely below the level of social attention, that all sorts of things are probably going on already that we don't know about and can't know about, whether it's shaping PR campaigns or assessing data that's coming in from any number of the enormous data pools that are out there about consumers, and using that information in ways that are beneficial to a government agency, a non-governmental organization of some sort, or a corporation, without anybody knowing.
Yeah, and part of the problem is I think we report on the bad stuff, like the bias. The bias in AI doing analysis and things like that. I mean, you hear about that, and you hear about, like AI making music and AI making art, and, like, oh no, we're not going to have any more artists because AI is going to make all the art. And no, we're not going to have any more musicians, and things like that. And it's just, you got to think like, really, there's always going to be a space for a good human artist. He's not going to take over the world of art. I don't care,
But you can definitely see the fear that it's going to squeeze the number of places where people can get paid and make a living as an artist. If you can just get software to do it and grind it out 24/7, you'll have a lot fewer jobs for people who do background music for movies. or for television programs, who play light engagements in cocktail parties for big companies. Turn the AI on and let it go.
Hasn't that always been the fear with the advance of technology, though, that it would replace jobs?
And hasn't it? I mean,
yeah,
going back
don't
to
new jobs
17th
get
century,
created. Yeah. I think new jobs get created, though, you know, so I think it's okay. Like, I was talking to somebody in cybersecurity, and they do analysis on things that are found, you know, like viruses that are found and things like that. And I said, well, wouldn't it be great if you could share the knowledge with other people? Because like let's say a virus comes and attacks a company in an industry, they've got all the companies in the same industry are doing the same analysis. So if you could share that knowledge, you know, some way, somehow, then all of a sudden, like, people may be made redundant. He's like, I'll be out of a job. I go, well, you could work on a new problem. Maybe you could work on an AI problem. He's like, oh, that sounds great. You know, so yeah, you know, maybe we could work on something that was more fun, you know, or a different problem or a different type of, maybe your creativity could be funneled in a new way. I don't know. I have, again, it's the fear, right? Do we stop out of fear?
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes we do.
Sometimes we do. And as with biological warfare, I think it's turned out well for us in a few cases. In other places, like using hydrogen for lighter than air travel, it hasn't worked out that well for us. And we kind of shot ourselves in the foot after the Hindenburg went down. But I think it's always a bad idea to react out of fear instead of taking the fear into account and acting rationally, considering the things that make us afraid. And I think that's the part that we're at now. We've got to be making the rational consideration in light of the things that make us afraid, because there's reason for some of those fears. They're very well grounded.
I totally agree. I mean, I was thinking about, you know, I like to take things to the extreme when I'm considering a problem. And I was thinking about the atom bomb, you know, because like, you know, people were very afraid of that, you know, but then we were afraid that that Hitler was also doing it. So we created it, you know. So I don't know, you know, should we have done that? You know, it was a horrible thing that happened.
Yeah.
You don't know.
And we've been afraid of every single step we've taken with nuclear weapons since then. And we've still taken them. And so far, we've managed not to do all the things we were most afraid of. But, you know, that's only so far. Tomorrow's another day.
Yeah. Right.
Well, on that somber note,
yeah, exactly.
You can see how much more fun this is when you can actually drink the beer during the conversation. That's about all.
And we don't all die in the end.
That's about where we have to call it for the day. But Kori, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been tremendous fun. I'm sure I'll want to have you back and have more conversations around this topic or others as we go through the next year or so. Thanks everyone who's watched and or listened through this. And until next time, I'm John Burke, and this has been 3 Beers IT.